Hello, my name is Joanna Ludlow. I'm here at the 2019 ADRBC Symposium, and I have the pleasure of speaking with John Radford today. John is a partner and co-owner of Transpectives Consulting. Welcome to John.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Joanne.
It's great to have you. Yeah. So I understand that you had a session earlier today, Mediation Skills Lab. Can you tell us a little bit about how that went and what you covered?
It was fun doing it. It was. In part because conflict is messy, right? Just generally, conflict's messy. And I think often mediators feel that they need to kind of control the process, keep it working on track, right? But the reality is life is not quite like that. So I think many mediators put themselves under unnecessary pressure by trying to keep things on track and and when it doesn't follow, they often look at themselves and say, well, this has failed. So I think part of our session was to say part of the messiness is what's going on not just between people but within the person, right? And it's happening between the people that you're working with in a conflict situation, clearly, but it's also happening within you as a mediator, because you're a person and the conflict's going on the inside and it's going on between. So.
Yeah, when I was speaking with Vi recently, we kind of chatted about the ecosystem and how the mediator really shouldn't assume that they are not a part of that ecosystem and that they change it just by being in the room. Yeah. And that's kind of what you covered today, and went over skills for the for the practitioners.
Yeah.
Okay.
And part of those skills is just being aware. We talk about self-awareness, but I think what Vi and I did was to try and unpack that a bit more, and think about. So how do you think about what's going on in front of you or with you as a mediator, but also it's impacting you, right? And often in our training, I know in my training some years ago, but even today it's still quite strong that in that training we would have to manage that conflict and we're saying, sure, part of it is manage it, but a more significant part is actually using the inner conflict we feel to deal with what's going on around us, and there's value in that, right?
Just to be as kind of explicit to our audience, what is that value and what does that look like?
So I think a key part of the value is that it gives us insight. I mean, I used to do skin diving, right? Going goggling in the water, and in a way it's putting on a set of goggles and looking below the surface of the conflicts we work in. And there's great value. And part of that below the surface is the identity. And we think about identity not in the typical way of saying, I am this or I'm that person in terms of identity. But identity is more dynamic. It's evolving, and it's who I believe I am or need to be in a particular situation. So that as a mediator is important because I place some pressure on myself to perform in a certain way when I'm in a mediation situation. So what we were doing there is unpacking that in a way that gave them some sense of what that is to be in control of it.
Wow, okay. So people were coming away from your presentation with a little bit more self-awareness, or at least an awareness to become more self-aware.
Yeah, and it's probably beyond the self-awareness, because it's part of what we're saying is be aware of what's going on for yourself. But and embracing that rather than pushing away from it, and another aspect of it is to be aware of what's going on between you and others, but also you're part of that system, which is part of that ecological system that you're in. Yeah. So.
Okay. So we have had the pleasure of having you at the symposium. I remember last year as well.
Yeah.
What has your impression been about the symposium, and how have you been finding it this year?
I like the fact that the symposium has focused on one of the areas being the whole reconciliation and what's going on in our country around the conflict between First Nations and the ongoing, well over a century conflict. I think helping bring together people who are experiencing and pushing frontiers in managing and dealing and negotiating even, but in that conflict, I think it's a great step. Because it's not just talking about it, it's people who are participating in it are sharing experience. That is valuable. Not just to people who are here who are professionals, but I think it's valuable to the country if somehow that could get out in some form.
Yeah, there's an astronomical amount of experience in the room.
It really is,
great
right?
to bring
It
it
really
together.
is. So even from those questions, that was further insight, right? The kind of questions, the kind of impact it has on people. It's really, really useful.
I think that's all of our time today. Did you have any closing remarks or anything you'd like to leave us with?
I just, conflict is an interesting thing. We often, as mediators, we want to resolve conflict, and I think that's a key aim. But I also think, I know Vi and I, over the years, we've begun to see the significance of what we would call building capacity for conflict. And building capacity is going beyond just resolving, because sometimes we can resolve a conflict, but we resolve the issue, but we're not resolving something more fundamental to that community, to that organization, to that family, whatever level we're talking about. And so I think part of the frontiers of conflict today is helping community, and that comes right down to individuals, it comes down to family, to build capacity for conflict. And what I mean by that is the ability to truly not just try and sort out the issues right now. We need to do that, but we also need to find ways of working together such that we can have the really challenging discussions that conflict we tend to, push away from. We can actually engage that, and that's easy for me to sit here and say that. That's a life challenge to make it, right? I've noticed over the decades I've been involved in conflict, we understand it hugely better, but the way we do it is not that much better, right? If I look at the world around us and some of the challenges of it. So I'm hoping, one of my suggestions for next year, 2020, right, is we should engage part of the problem about here we are destroying our world. We have got some of the best ever in history, people who understand conflict and work in conflict. But we're still struggling to find ways in which people can really engage each other about the fact that we're self-destructing. That is fascinating to me. And so what I like about the field of conflict is we don't have all the answers. And in fact, unless we're moving forward and failing and learning from it, we're not doing anything. So I hope we do more of that, right?
Work ourselves out of a job.
Yeah, it'd be great if we could.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us and for all the great work that you do.
Nice
we really
to be here.
appreciate it.
Thank
Great.
you.